Now the wing is all covered and tightened and beautiful. I put the first coat of polybrush on there. Now the next step is going to be to do the rib lacing. Rib lacing, we take thread, waxed thread, special thread of course, just everything's got to be special, and go through the wing from the lower portion or from the upper portion through these wing ribs around the rib to tie them down, to tie this fabric down, because this fabric is not tight against the ribs and it'll have a tendency to drum and wear out faster. But on the top it'll lift, because this airplane in flight weighs somewhere around 2,000 pounds more or less. So it takes 2,000 pounds of lift to pick the airplane up, and you've got that lift of course distributed out across two wings, so I don't know how many pounds per square inch that is. I'm not going to do the math on it. Needless to say, there's a lot of force picking this wing up from the bottom and lifting that fabric up off of the ribs. Now of course not all of that is going to be force lifting up on the top of the wing. Part of it is going to be force on the bottom of the wing pushing the wing up, because the wing sits at an angle of attack, so you've got a certain amount of force pushing up on the wing here, but you've got an amount of force going over the top that creates a venturi here that causes lift. You can stick your hand out the window of the car when you're driving. As you move your hand back and forth, you can feel how the wind wants to push your hand back. That's what is lift. So anyway, we have to tie the fabric down so it doesn't vibrate and doesn't get ripped off the top of the wing. So there is a chart in the FAA AC 4313 that tells you how far apart your rib stitching needs to be, and in the area within the prop wash, it needs to be, for this airplane, a minimum of 2.5 inches apart, or I should say a maximum of 2.5 inches apart. And for the areas outside of the slipstream, because of the maximum speed of this airplane, it recommends 3.5 inches apart. Well, I've got these half ribs or partial ribs here in this fuel tank bay, and they're going to be within the slipstream area. So I'm going to do those 2 inches apart just to make sure I get them right. And then the ones farther out, we're going to do 3 inches apart. So we've got 3 ribs in here that are going to be tied down just to the ribs, just stitched in here on this lower section. And also this outboard fuel tank bay rib has a big lip on the top of it that sticks out for the fuel tank lid cover to tie down to, so that's not very convenient to do rib stitching with, lacing with. So this one will also stitch the same way, just to the bottom. It's glued to the top, so it doesn't need, and then of course you got the fuel tank holding it down, so it doesn't need to be done there. But what I'm going to do is measure this out, and we want our first rib stitch to be about 1 inch from the spar. So we'll mark that 1 inch, and then we're going to go 1 inch from the forward spar. Now, it doesn't say to do that, but that's what I'm going to do from the inboard of the forward spar. So that gives me 33.5 inches. So if I go 2 inches then from that one, 4, 6, 8, that's pretty good. So I'll do the same, measure the same amount here off of this one, and go from 1 inch in the rear spar. So now I can go ahead and run my straight edge across those marks. Well, now here's the part that makes you pucker up. After getting all this fabric on here nice and beautiful and everything's tight and clean, now we get to poke holes in it. So we'll go along here, right alongside these ribs, everywhere we've got one of these lines, and just poke a hole in the fabric there. I'll go down right beside the ribs, just like that. You have to get the holes right next to the rib. Like here, I got it out a little bit too far. You want it right next to the rib, because if it's out too far, when you go to tighten that lacing up, it'll just saw through the fabric and create a tear and weak spot in it. Now the next thing we get to do is to lay out all of the stitching for the rest of the wing outboard. Now I've got this laid out here on this inboard wing section where we go with 2 inches. I want to do the rest of the wing in 3 inches. I've got Carl's template that he made here, and we lay it on so the spar entry points is on the spars of the wing, and I just transfer those lines. I've got to put my glasses on so I can see it. This one line here should be pretty darn close because it's 1 inch, and 1 inch is 1 inch. Doesn't matter whether it's top or bottom. These other lines are off. Some of them are pretty close. There, put this light underneath there. That should make a difference. Oh yeah. See it?
Anything exciting happened after I left? Frank finally showed up at about a quarter.
Ready?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, I got Eternal September.
Alright, I've punched a whole bunch of holes in my brand new fabric. That makes you pucker up, but that's got to be done. Now the fun begins. All the work I've done so far, just like framing a house. You frame up a house, there's a lot of work to build each wall and get them up and put the trusses on and the roof on and the walls on and stuff like that. But that goes up relatively fast. The real time and detail in building a house is doing the finish work. And that's what we're doing now, is the finish work. We've got to do all of this rib lacing, and then we've got to tape everything, and then we've got to put the finish coats on everything. So there's tapes that go over the ribs here that the lacing goes over, and then there's tape that goes over the top of that, and then there's doublers and stuff that go on over, like where the spars attachments stick through, and a bunch of other places there where we got to put doublers on. And then there's inspection covers that go in here on the wing bottom, and then finish tapes that go over the spar and leading edges and around that. That's all got to be put on. Every one of those has got to go on individually, put on a bed of poly brush and then put the tapes on and bed it, and then it's all got to be run over with the iron and make sure all the seams get put down and everything. And then we got to do 2 finish coats with poly brush, and then 3 cross coats, which is basically 6 coats with poly spray, and then the finish color. So there's a lot of work yet to be done on here. A lot of detail work, which all takes time. Well, I got to figure out now how I'm going to address doing this rib stitching. I've got a couple options. I could get my creeper out and have my wife or somebody come and help, and then run thread down through, have them grab it, push it back up, tie it off, and go to the next one and do that with somebody laying down on the creeper underneath. I thought about maybe putting some lugs in the beam, in the timber overhead, and hanging that wing from that timber. Well, one person could effectively do it then, but 2 people would be a lot easier, 1 on each side. Or I can make a rotisserie so that I can roll that wing over as I need to every time and do it by myself instead of having to have help to do it like I've been doing now. So anyway, I've got to figure out what I'm going to do towards that, and I've got the rotisserie I made for rotating the fuselage when I redid the fuselage. I might see if I can adapt it somehow. Got some thinking to do on that and what I want to do. Like I said, I was thinking about just hanging it from the ceiling, and that would work for doing the rib stitching. Oh well, time to start thinking, figuring things out here.